My foster parents, the Petersons, Mr. and Mrs. Salt of the Earth Peterson, they didn't just raise me after my real parents died in that god-awful car wreck when I was 2. They robbed me. For 15 goddamn years. They cashed those fat government checks meant for my upbringing, for my food, my clothes, my goddamn future. And what did I get? Holes in my shoes and lectures about how grateful I should be. When I, at 17, finally stumbled onto their dirty, stinking secret, their whole loving family act blew up in their faces. They didn't apologize. Oh no. They called me an ungrateful, lying, crazy brat. Then they tried to get CPS to declare me a dangerous delinquent so they could kick my ass to the curb and shut me up before their whole disgusting 15-year scam was exposed to the world. Little did those thieving bastards know, their gravy train was about to hit a goddamn brick wall and I was the one driving the locomotive. Let me tell you exactly how I made them pay for every single stolen dime, every single lie. It all started on a miserable, soul-crushingly boring Saturday. I was 17 months from graduating high school, if I could even scrape together enough cash for the damn cap and gown. The Petersons, my loving guardians, were out, of course. Some urgent charity gala for underprivileged youth, Mrs. Peterson, Carol that witch, had cooed, adjusting her new, probably very expensive silk scarf. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't so goddamn sickening. My underprivileged youth funds were probably paying for the canapes at their fancy party. I was alone in that house, their house. It never ever felt like my home, more like a clean, well-maintained holding cell where I was perpetually reminded of my place, a charity case, a burden, someone who should just be endlessly, pathetically grateful for their scraps. Mr. Peterson's, John, the old windbag, home office. The door was usually locked tighter than Fort Knox. His inner sanctum, he'd call it, puffing out his chest like he was a Wall Street tycoon instead of a two-bit local insurance agent who always seemed to be struggling. Struggling to keep up with Carol's shopping sprees, more like. But that day, the lock was janky. A little jiggle, a push, and click. It swung open. Don't ask me why I went in. Boredom. A lifetime of suppressed resentment. A gut feeling that something in that room stank worse than Mr. Peterson's old golf shoes. And there it was, not even cleverly hidden. Just sitting there on the top shelf of his dusty, neglected bookshelf, crammed behind a row of ancient tax codes nobody had probably looked at since Nixon was in office. A shoebox, a faded, beat-up old Nike shoebox. The kind you'd see at a garage sale for $0.25, held together with a single, brittle, ancient rubber band. My heart started to do this weird thumping thing in my chest. A sick, cold premonition, like I was about to open Pandora's goddamn box. I pulled it down. Dust bunnies the size of small rodents rained down on me. Inside, buried under a pile of what looked suspiciously like losing lottery tickets and a bunch of IOUs from some dude named Vinny the Weasel, classy, John, real classy, was a stack of official-looking envelopes. Thick ones. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, and the ones that made my breath catch in my throat, a whole slew of letters from the Social Security Administration, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. John and Carol Peterson, but the subject line on every single damn one screamed at me in cold, impersonal, bureaucratic print, Dependent Child Survivor Benefits, Ethan Blackwood. Ethan Blackwood, that's me, or the ghost of me they'd been profiting from. My hands started to shake, so bad I almost dropped the whole damn box. Survivor benefits, my survivor benefits. What fresh hell was this? I ripped open one of the SSA envelopes, my fingers clumsy, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. It was a statement, a goddamn statement, detailing a monthly payment to them, for me. And the amount, it wasn't Powerball winnings, but it was more money than I'd seen in one place in my entire goddamn life. Enough for new sneakers every month, not just the ones with cardboard patching the holes. Enough for decent food, not just their leftover casseroles and stale bread. Enough for me to actually go on those school trips they always claimed we couldn't possibly afford this year, Ethan. Money is just so incredibly tight, you understand. Oh, I understood now. I understood perfectly. This money, this steady, reliable stream of cash. It had been flowing into their greedy little pockets every single month for 15 goddamn years. Ever since I was 2 years old, a traumatized orphan toddler delivered to their oh-so-charitable doorstep after my real parents' car was obliterated on some icy highway. The parents I barely remembered. The parents whose memory the Petersons had so piously, so publicly, claimed to honor by welcoming me into their loving home. Loving. What a goddamn joke. I tore through the rest of the envelopes like a man possessed. Bank statements, account after account I'd never even known existed, all in their names, not mine. Deposits, regular as clockwork, matching the benefit amounts from the SSA letters, and then the withdrawals. Oh, the glorious, sickening, enraging withdrawals. Majestic Cruise Lines, Caribbean Paradise Package, deluxe stateroom. That was the year I had to wear clothes from the church donation bin because my growth spurt had made all my thrift store rags too small. Peterson, Carol, Nordstrom shopping spree. That must have been when she bought that ridiculously expensive fur-lined coat she only wore to special occasions, while I was told my request for a new winter jacket because mine had a broken zipper was frivolous. Luxury auto imports, lease payment, BMW X5. Their goddamn fancy import SUV. The one they used to drive their precious angel daughter Ashley Peterson to her private ballet lessons while I was taking the public bus, often late, to my after-school job that they insisted I get to build character, and probably so I'd have my own damn money and stop bothering them. The air in that dusty, forgotten office suddenly felt like it was being sucked out by a giant industrial vacuum. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. My ears were ringing. All those years. All those goddamn years of their sanctimonious lectures. Be grateful, Ethan, for what you have. Money doesn't grow on trees. You know, we work hard for every penny. We sacrifice so much to give you a good life, Ethan. You should appreciate it more. Sacrifice? They hadn't sacrificed a goddamn thing. They'd profited. They'd lived it up, indulged themselves, funded their pathetic, keeping up with the Joneses lifestyle, all on my dead parents' legacy, on the money that was meant to give me a fighting chance, a decent start in life. I felt a wave of nausea so intense, so visceral, I had to grip the edge of Mr. Peterson's cheap particle board desk to keep from collapsing. My childhood. My entire goddamn understanding of my life with them. It wasn't just a lie. It was a meticulously crafted 15-year con. And I was the unwitting, uncomplaining mark. They weren't my saviors. They weren't even decent human beings. They were goddamn parasites, grifters, thieves, cloaked in the guise of loving foster parents, feeding off my loss, off my parents' tragic deaths. I don't know how long I sat there, on that worn, threadbare carpet, surrounded by the irrefutable paper trail evidence of their disgusting, decades-long betrayal. My world, the one I'd so carefully, so painfully navigated, it didn't just crack, it exploded, violently, irreparably, into a million tiny, jagged, razor-sharp pieces. Then I heard it, the familiar, grating sound of their BMW, my BMW, in a twisted way, pulling into the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of car doors. They were home from their charity outing. And something inside me, something that had been dormant, suppressed for 15 long years, finally snapped. The shock, the grief, the soul-crushing betrayal, it all coalesced, solidified into a cold, hard, diamond-sharp rage. They weren't going to get away with this. Oh no. Not anymore. The game was over, and I was about to change the goddamn rules. I didn't try to hide the shoebox. I didn't try to put the papers back. What was the point? Their comfortable little charade was done. I just sat there, on the floor of Mr. Peterson's inner sanctum, and I waited. For the architects of my misery to walk in and face the truth they'd so carefully, so cruelly hidden for so long, their judgment day had arrived, and I was going to be the goddamn executioner. Mrs. Peterson, Carol, waltzed in first, all smiles and expensive perfume, probably still basking in the glow of whatever charity event she'd graced with her presence. Ethan, darling, what are you doing in your father's... She stopped, dead. Her eyes, those cold, calculating blue eyes, landed on the papers, on the shoebox, on my face. The professionally applied makeup couldn't hide the sudden, ugly modeling of her skin as the blood drained from her face. That practiced, sweet-as-pie smile, it didn't just vanish, it shattered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated, cornered rat panic. Mr. Peterson, John, lumbered in behind her, already frowning, probably about to launch into one of his usual tirades about respecting his private workspace. He saw the papers, too. He saw my expression. And he knew. Oh, he knew. The jig was up. The gravy train had just hit a goddamn brick wall. Well, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, eerily so, a terrifying counterpoint to the volcano of rage erupting inside me. Looks like I finally found out where all that tight money was going. Quite the impressive portfolio of sacrifices you've accumulated here. Paid for by yours truly, apparently. I picked up one of the cruise line statements, waving it a little. This a particularly touching sacrifice, Carol? Or was this more of a treating yourself because being a foster parent is just so damn hard kind of purchase? She found her voice then, or rather, her shriek. That high-pitched, nails-on-a-chalkboard whine that always signaled she was about to play the victim. How dare you, Ethan Blackwood? How dare you sneak in here and go through our private, personal financial documents? You ungrateful, disrespectful little thief. Thief? Me? The goddamn irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Oh, I'm the thief now, am I? I laughed. A harsh, bitter, ugly sound that seemed to echo the ugliness of their souls. I'm the thief for finding out you've been lining your pockets with money meant for an orphan? For the orphan you supposedly loved like your own? I spat the words out like poison. You want to talk about thieves, Carol? Let's talk about the 15 years you and John here have been committing systematic, cold-blooded fraud against a child. Against me. John Peterson, bless his embezzling heart, finally decided to step up, puffing out his chest, trying to recapture some shred of his lost authority. But his voice, usually so booming and self-important, came out as a reedy little tremor. Now see here, Ethan, son. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. A simple, clerical oversight. A clerical oversight? For 15 years? The sheer, unmitigated gall? He was actually going to try and gaslight me now, with the proof literally spread out on his goddamn office floor? Oh, a clerical oversight, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm so thick it could have frosted a cake. Right, like that clerical oversight that paid for your shiny BMW X5? Or the misunderstanding that funded Ashley's out-of-state private university tuition? Your actual daughter? The one who got designer clothes and European vacations? While I was told there wasn't enough money for me to even join the high school damn chess club because it had a $20 registration fee? Ashley, their precious princess, who probably floated through life on a cloud of my stolen benefits, oblivious or, more likely, willfully ignorant. Don't you dare bring Ashley into this, Carol Peterson shrieked, her face turning an even uglier shade of blotchy purple, her carefully constructed composure crumbling like a stale cookie. She's a good girl. A privileged girl, yes, because her parents worked hard for it. Unlike some people I could name, who clearly possess no sense of gratitude, no loyalty, no shred of common decency or respect for the elders who sacrificed everything for them. Sacrificed everything, right? Everything except their next vacation or their next luxury car payment, apparently. The holy trinity of Peterson family values: gratitude, loyalty, respect. All one-way streets, pointing directly at me. "I'm done talking to you two," I said, my voice suddenly flat, devoid of the screaming rage from moments before. The volcano had erupted. Now came the cold, hard lava flow of determination. I began scooping up the shoebox, the damning papers, my evidence, my weapons. I wasn't going to let them get their thieving, conniving hands on it, not now, not ever. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Lawyer. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold, and full of unspoken threat. I didn't actually have a lawyer. Not yet. But they didn't need to know the fine print of my non-existent legal representation. The raw, naked fear that flashed in their eyes, replacing the sputtering indignation and the theatrical tears, was all the confirmation I needed. They were scared. Good. They damn well should be terrified down to their greedy, rotten cores. I walked out of that office, out of that house of lies, that den of thieves, without looking back, without a single word of goodbye. My legs were shaking so hard I thought they might give out. My heart was still trying to beat its way out of my chest. But for the first time, in what felt like my entire miserable, hand-me-down existence, there was a new feeling coiling in my gut, alongside the volcanic rage and the crushing betrayal. Power. A sense of control. For 15 long goddamn years, they had held all the cards. For 15 years, they had dictated the terms of my life, my worth, my very existence. Not anymore. The game had just been flipped on its goddamn head. And I, Ethan Blackwood, the ungrateful brat, the charity case, the delusional foster kid, was about to burn their whole crooked, stinking, fraudulent world to the goddamn ground. They thought they could silence me, exploit me, and then just toss me aside like yesterday's garbage when I finally found out the truth. They had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. Walking away from that house, the shoebox of their deceit clutched to my chest like it was the goddamn Hope Diamond didn't magically make the Petersons disappear in a puff of embarrassed smoke. Oh, hell no. John and Carol Peterson, my loving foster parents, weren't the type to just slink away when their con was exposed. They were cornered rats. And cornered rats, as everyone knows, don't just squeak. They bite hard. Their comfortable little world, built on 15 years of my stolen money and their holier-than-thou lies, was about to implode. And they were going to drag me through every disgusting inch of their self-made hell to try and save their own miserable hides. I knew it. I could practically smell the desperation and cheap cologne wafting off John already. The first volley in their pathetic war against the truth came faster than a speeding bullet, and it hit right where they knew it would hurt, my already shaky standing at school. I was still a senior, remember? Just a few goddamn months from graduation, if I could somehow conjure up the cash for a cap and gown now that my generous benefactors were otherwise occupied trying to cover their asses, suddenly Mrs. Albright, the school guidance counselor, a woman whose main talent seemed to be nodding sympathetically while offering zero practical solutions, was summoning me to her chintz-filled office. Her face was a carefully arranged mask of worried, professional concern, the kind that usually means you're about to get screwed over, politely. "Ethan, honey," she began, her voice all syrupy and condescending, like I was a particularly dense 5-year-old who'd just mistaken the cat for a Cabbage Patch Kid. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson called me this morning. Well, Ethan, they're very, very worried about you, dear." Worried about me? My jaw practically unhinged. The goddamn unmitigated audacity. After they were the ones caught red-handed, their greedy little fingers sticky from 15 years in my metaphorical cookie jar, they were worried about me? I almost laughed in her face. Almost. They said. Mrs. Albright continued, blissfully unaware of the silent, volcanic fury building inside me, that you've been, well, acting out a bit, Ethan. Making some rather outlandish accusations. They're deeply concerned about your emotional well-being. They mentioned you've been under a tremendous amount of stress lately, what with finals approaching and, well, your rather unique family situation. My unique family situation, right. The unique situation where my supposed guardians had been systematically defrauding a minor, me, for over a goddamn decade. That unique situation. Mrs. Albright, I said, my voice dangerously calm, a trick I'd perfected over years of navigating the Petersons' particular brand of passive-aggressive psychological warfare. What exactly did John and Carol Peterson accuse me of this time? She fidgeted with a stress ball shaped like a smiling brain on her desk. Cute. Well, dear, she said, avoiding my direct gaze, they indicated that you had a rather significant outburst at home yesterday. That you were making some wild, unsubstantiated claims about their financial management. And that you seemed very agitated. Perhaps even a little delusional was the word Carol used, I believe. Delusional, there it was, the Peterson family motto. If you can't win the argument with facts because, you're a lying, thieving scumbag, just declare the other person batshit crazy. It had worked on me for years, chipped away at my self-confidence, made me doubt my own goddamn sanity. But not anymore, not after that shoebox. That shoebox was my truth serum, my reality check. Mrs. Albright, I said, leaning forward, my voice low but vibrating with an intensity that finally made her look up, a flicker of unease in her usually placid eyes. John and Carol Peterson are liars, and they are thieves. They have been systematically stealing my Social Security survivor benefit money from the government for 15 years. I have the bank statements. I have the letters from the Social Security Administration. I have irrefutable black and white proof. What they are, Mrs. Albright, is terrified of getting caught. And that is why they are desperately trying to paint me as unstable, as delusional, as anything other than what I am, a victim of their prolonged, disgusting fraud. She just blinked at me, that condescending little half smile still trying to fight its way onto her face. Now, Ethan, she said, reaching out to pat my hand like I was a hysterical toddler about to throw a tantrum. I snatched my hand away. I know you've been through an incredible amount of hardship. Losing your biological parents at such a tender age, it's a terrible, life-altering trauma. And sometimes, Ethan, when we're very, very upset, when we feel profoundly wronged, our perceptions can become skewed. We might misinterpret complex situations, or we might look for someone, anyone, to blame for our unhappiness. Misinterpret? Skewed perceptions? I wanted to dump that entire goddamn shoebox of their financial filth, their cruise receipts, their designer shopping spree records right onto her pristine, meticulously organized desk. I wanted to scream until her perfectly coiffed hair stood on end, but I knew, with a sickening certainty, it was no use. John and Carol Peterson were pillars of the community. Respected. Church-going. PTA volunteering, for God's sake. Who was she or anyone else in this goddamn town going to believe? Them, the picture-perfect concerned foster parents, or me, the troubled, agitated, delusional foster kid suddenly spewing outlandish accusations that threatened to shatter their carefully crafted image? It was a goddamn rhetorical question. The whispers, the poison, started almost immediately after that infuriating meeting. At first, it was just the sideways glances in the school hallways, the sudden awkward hush that would fall over a group of my classmates when I walked past. Then, it got more direct, more brutal. Heard you finally lost it on your foster parents, Blackwood. What'd you do? Try to burn the house down? That from Mark Riley, a jock asshole I'd barely spoken 2 words to in my life. My mom said the Petersons are really worried about you, Ethan, like professional help worried. That from Sarah Jenkins, a girl who used to pass me notes in history class. Now, she looked at me like I was a goddamn leper. Dude, are you okay? Seriously. People are saying some really crazy messed up stuff about you. That at least from one of my few remaining so-called friends who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. My circle of acquaintances, never large to begin with, started to shrink with alarming speed. My teachers, even the ones who'd previously praised my essays or my quiet diligence, now looked at me with this awful, suffocating mixture of pity and wary suspicion. I was being isolated, systematically, expertly. The Petersons weren't just trying to protect their stolen money, their comfortable lifestyle built on my dead parents' tragedy. They were actively trying to destroy my credibility, my character, my entire goddamn social existence before I could even begin to get my real story out to someone who might actually listen. Even my crappy, minimum wage, part-time job shelving dusty old books at the local library wasn't safe from their insidious reach. Old Mr. Abernathy, the head librarian, a man whose entire vocabulary seemed to consist mainly of disapproving grunts and the occasional long-suffering sigh, actually summoned me into his tiny, book-lined, coffin-sized office. This was a man who usually only communicated with me through hastily scribbled, barely legible notes about reshelving the entire goddamn history section. This was not good. Ethan, my boy, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, which, in my current state of paranoid hypervigilance, somehow made it even worse. He peered at me over his ancient smudged bifocals, his face usually a mask of perpetual curmudgeonliness, etched with a concern I wasn't accustomed to seeing from him. Had a rather distressing visit this morning from your guardians, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. He paused, clearing his throat with a sound like gravel rattling in a tin can. They said, well, Ethan, they said you were going through a rather tumultuous period at home, that you might be in need of some extended time off to sort things out. For your own well-being, of course. Time off. They were trying to get me fired, or at least make me look so unreliable, so unstable, that Mr. Abernathy, a man who valued punctuality and quiet subservience above all else, would have no choice but to let me go. That library job wasn't much. A few bucks an hour that mostly went to buying my own damn school supplies because the Petersons were always too strapped to afford them. But it was my money. The only money I had in this world that hadn't been filtered through their thieving, greedy, sanctimonious hands. Mr. Abernathy, I said, my voice tight with a desperation I couldn't quite conceal, the words tumbling out. They're lying to you, sir. They're lying to everyone. They stole from me. For years. I have the proof. I'm trying to get help. Please, you have to believe me. He just sighed, a long, weary, world-weary sound, and began meticulously polishing his already spotless glasses with a frayed corner of his ancient moth-eaten cardigan. He didn't meet my eyes. Look, son, he said, his voice a low rumble. Whatever is transpiring between you and your foster parents, well, that's a private family matter. And in my long experience, Ethan, private family matters have a most unfortunate and rather nasty habit of spilling over, contaminating everything around them, making a dreadful mess for everyone involved. He finally looked up at me, his gaze surprisingly direct, though not unkind. Perhaps a little break from your duties here wouldn't be such a detrimental idea, for all concerned. Just until things settle down a bit, eh? I walked out of that library, the smell of old paper and defeat clinging to me, feeling like the goddamn walls were physically closing in on me. They were systematically, ruthlessly, dismantling my life, piece by painstaking piece. School, friends, work. What was next? Were they actually going to try and have me committed to some nut house? The thought, as outrageous and melodramatic as it sounded even to my own ears, sent a fresh wave of cold, sharp, paralyzing fear through me. Knowing the Petersons, knowing their bottomless capacity for deceit and their rabid instinct for self-preservation, it wasn't entirely out of the realm of goddamn possibility. And finding a lawyer? that was rapidly turning into another special kind of fresh hell. The first one, I'd managed to get a free 15-minute consultation with some slick, ambulance-chasing parasite whose smarmy face I'd seen on a late-night television commercial practically laughed me out of his cheap, imitation, wood-paneled office before I'd even finished my first sentence. Foster kid versus respected church-going PTA volunteering community members, he'd sneered, chomping on a disgusting unlit cigar that smelled like a wet dog. With no money up front for a hefty retainer, I presume? Kid, you don't have a case. You have a goddamn delusion. My advice? Get some serious therapy before you end up in serious trouble. He'd actually winked, the scumbag. The second one, a younger woman who at least pretended to listen with a modicum of sympathy, looked through a few of the bank statements I'd frantically, messily photocopied at a Kinko's. Her eyes widened a little at the cruise line charges, at the Saks receipts. For a moment, a tiny, pathetic flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe she saw it? Maybe she believed me? Then came the inevitable soul-crushing question. This is compelling, Mr. Blackwood, but complex, potentially very time-consuming. What kind of retainer are you prepared to offer to secure my services? My inheritance, the measly few $1,000s the Petersons hadn't yet managed to siphon off from some forgotten savings bond left in my name by my actual parents, was tied up tighter than a goddamn drum, thanks to my dependent survivor status and their iron-fisted guardianship. I had about $53 and change in my wallet, and half a pack of stale crackers in my backpack. Not exactly the kind of financial arsenal that impresses high-powered attorneys. I was starting to feel hopeless, well beyond hopeless, that white-hot, righteous, cleansing rage I'd felt when I first found those incriminating papers in that dusty shoebox. It was still there, a burning coal simmering deep inside me, but it was being choked, smothered, drowned by a rising tide of black, suffocating despair. What if they did get away with it? What if I couldn't make them pay? What if they actually succeeded in painting me as the crazy, ungrateful, delinquent orphan, and they just waltzed off into the goddamn sunset with 15 years of my stolen money, laughing all the way to the bank? The thought was a lead weight in my stomach, unbearable, crushing the very life out of me. Then, like a frayed, almost invisible lifeline tossed to a drowning man in the middle of a goddamn hurricane, I remembered Miss Diaz, my 7th grade English teacher. God, that woman was a firecracker. Tough as nails, a vocabulary that could strip paint off a battleship, but with a heart of pure, unadulterated gold and a fierce, unwavering, almost terrifying belief in justice for the underdog. She'd always seen something in me, something beyond the quiet, withdrawn, perpetually wary foster kid everyone else in that goddamn school either ignored or pitied. She'd encouraged my writing, the only thing I'd ever felt even remotely good at. Told me I had a voice, a powerful voice. Told me to never, ever let anyone silence it. If you see an injustice, Ethan Blackwood, she drilled into our apathetic 7th grade brains, her dark, intelligent eyes blazing with a passion that was both inspiring and a little bit scary. You don't just stand by and wring your hands like a goddamn ninny. You fight it. You use your words. You use your brain. You make those bastards listen. I hadn't seen her, spoken to her, in years. She'd retired a while back, moved to a little cottage on the other side of town, or so I'd heard. But our town wasn't that big. I found a number for a Maria Diaz in the online white pages, in the right general neighborhood. My hands were sweating so bad I almost dropped my cheap burner phone. Yeah, I'd bought a goddamn burner, paranoid as hell that the Petersons, with their newfound desperation, were somehow tracking my calls, listening in. What if it wasn't her? What if she didn't remember little Ethan Blackwood, the charity case with the scribbled notebooks? What if she, like everyone else in this godforsaken town, thought I was just some crazy, delinquent kid making up wild, unbelievable stories? The phone rang. Once, twice. 3 eternal, agonizing times. I was just about to hang up, my heart sinking like a stone into the pit of my stomach, when a voice, sharp, clear, and instantly, wonderfully, terrifyingly familiar, answered. Diaz speaking. Who the hell is this? And make it quick. I was just about to water my petunias. Miss Diaz? I stammered, my voice cracking like a goddamn pubescent choir boy's. It was her. It was really her. It's Ethan. Ethan Blackwood. From your 7th grade English class? Years ago? The one who wrote that terrible poem about the angst-ridden squirrel? A beat of silence. A silence so profound I thought my heart would stop. Then a chuckle. A dry, raspy, wonderfully familiar chuckle. Ethan Blackwood. Good heavens, boy, is that really you? The angst-ridden squirrel. I still have that poem somewhere, you know. It wasn't half bad for a 12-year-old. You sound like you've wrestled a goddamn grizzly bear since then. And lost spectacularly. Worse, Miss Diaz, I said, a hysterical laugh, or maybe it was a sob, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me, a sound that was dangerously close to breaking. I think I'm living with a couple of them, and they're trying to eat me alive, and I really, really need your help. And just like that, with a desperation I hadn't known I possessed, I told her everything. The whole sordid, disgusting, unbelievable 15-year saga. From the shoebox in John Peterson's dusty office, to the clerical errors, to their vicious, systematic smear campaign at school, the whispers, the isolation, the goddamn soul-crushing hopelessness of it all. She listened, didn't interrupt once. Just listened, the silence on her end of the line not empty, but a comforting, non-judgmental, almost tangible presence. When I finally finished, my voice raw, my throat aching, my eyes burning with unshed tears, there was another long, profound silence. For a horrible, gut-wrenching moment, I thought she was going to hang up, to tell me I was delusional, to dismiss me like everyone else in this goddamn town had. Then she spoke. And her voice, Miss Diaz's voice, my 7th grade English teacher's voice, was pure, unadulterated, beautiful, righteous steel. Those thieving, manipulative, soulless, money-grubbing Petersons, she spat the name like it was a vile curse, like it left a physically bad taste in her mouth. I never trusted those two shiny-faced hypocrites, Ethan. Never. There was always something off about them. The way they'd talk about you at parent-teacher conferences, even back then. Like you were some kind of exotic charity project they were so nobly, so publicly undertaking. Instead of a child, a human being they were supposed to be loving and protecting and nurturing. She paused, and I could almost hear her righteous, magnificent anger crackling and spitting through the phone line, a beautiful, avenging fire. All right, Ethan Blackwood. Here's what we're goddamn well gonna do. First, you're gonna take a deep goddamn breath, because you sound like you're about to hyperventilate. Second, you're gonna stop feeling like a goddamn victim, because as of this moment, you're not, you're a fighter. And third, we, and the fierce, unwavering emphasis she put on that beautiful, beautiful word we made, hot, grateful tears finally spring to my eyes, are going to find you a lawyer. Not some ambulance-chasing parasite, not some timid, overpriced paper pusher, a real lawyer, a goddamn junkyard dog of a lawyer. Someone who will rip those Petersons a new one, legally speaking, and make them choke on every last one of their 15 years of lies. Because trust me on this, Ethan Blackwood, we are gonna make those bastards pay, dearly. We. That one little word. It was like a shot of pure, undiluted adrenaline straight to my weary, battered heart. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I didn't feel completely, utterly, terrifyingly alone in this goddamn fight. Miss Diaz, my 7th grade English teacher, retired but clearly not retreated from the battlefield of justice, she was going to help me fight. She believed me. She gave me a name, a number, a legal aid clinic downtown, one that specialized in exactly these kinds of god-awful, soul-destroying cases, juvenile justice, fiduciary abuse of minors, foster care exploitation nightmares. Ask for David Lee, Miss Diaz instructed, her voice all business now, sharp and focused. Tell him Maria Diaz sent you. Tell him you've got a pair of grade A, 5-star foster parent scumbags who need to be brought to justice swiftly, brutally, and very, very publicly. He'll know what to do. David Lee, he's a goddamn warrior, Ethan. And right now, a warrior is exactly what you desperately need in your corner. David Lee, a warrior. It sounded almost too good to be true. But after 15 long years of the Petersons' quiet, soul-crushing tyranny, after weeks of their blatant, vicious, character-assassinating attacks, I was ready to believe in anything. In anyone. This wasn't just a fight for my stolen money anymore, though God knows I wanted every last cent of that back. This was a goddamn war for my life, my future, my sanity, and the goddamn truth. And with Miss Diaz, my unexpected, fiery, avenging angel of 7th grade English, and hopefully this Mr. David Lee in my corner, I wasn't just gonna fight, I was gonna win. The Petersons, John and Carol, thought they could silence me, discredit me, erase me like I was some inconvenient smudge on their otherwise perfect, fraudulent, respectable lives. They were about to learn a very, very painful, very public lesson about underestimating the ungrateful brat they'd so carelessly, so cruelly tried to destroy. Their comfortable little world wasn't just gonna crash. Oh no. I was gonna douse that Mother R in gasoline, hand them the lit match myself, and I was gonna enjoy every goddamn second of the show. Meeting Mr. David Lee was like stepping onto a different kind of battlefield. Not the suffocating, passive-aggressive war zone of the Peterson household, but a real one, with strategies and weapons I didn't understand, but desperately needed. The Legal Aid Society office wasn't some fancy high-rise palace. No mahogany desks or panoramic city views like the lairs of the corporate liars and charlatans I'd already encountered in my short, miserable life. Just worn, faded linoleum floors that had seen too many desperate souls, flickering fluorescent lights that hummed with a weary energy, and stacks upon stacks of case files that probably represented 1,000 other heartbreaks, 1,000 other goddamn injustices. And Mr. David Lee, he wasn't some slick, power-suited, silver-tongued shark you see on television. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes that looked like they'd seen the worst of humanity, and then some, a rumpled shirt that had definitely seen better days, and an intensity that radiated off him like a goddamn blast furnace. Miss Diaz hadn't been kidding. This guy wasn't just a lawyer. He was a goddamn warrior, and he looked hungry for a fight. I laid it all out for him. The whole disgusting 15-year saga, the shoebox of lies, the bank statements that read like a thief's shopping list, the Caribbean cruises while I ate stale cereal, the Saks Fifth Avenue sprees while I wore shoes held together with duct tape. The Petersons' vicious, calculated smear campaign, Mrs. Albright's condescending, useless pity, Mr. Abernathy's spineless capitulation. I even told him about Miss Diaz, about her righteous, beautiful fury, about her being the one who'd sent me to him, a lifeline in a sea of bullshit. He listened, didn't interrupt, just listened, his gaze sharp, focused, occasionally making a quick, decisive note on a battered yellow legal pad. His office was small, cramped, overflowing with files, but in that moment it felt like the safest place in the world. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse, my throat raw from dredging up 15 years of accumulated poison and pain, he just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight, a dangerous edge that sent a shiver down my spine, a good shiver, this time. Mr. Blackwood, he said, and the way he said my name, with respect, with seriousness, it was like no one had ever said it before. What John and Carol Peterson have done to you is not just morally reprehensible, Ethan. It's criminal. We're looking at clear-cut fiduciary abuse of a minor. We're looking at fraud. We're looking at potential embezzlement of federal Social Security funds. They haven't just stolen your money, son. They've stolen your childhood, your trust, your sense of security. And then they had the unmitigated gall to try and steal your future by painting you as mentally unstable. We're not just going to aim to get your money back, Ethan. We're going to aim to make them accountable for every single goddamn thing. Accountable, that word again. It felt huge, real, possible. For so long, the Petersons had been untouchable, unaccountable, living in their little bubble of lies and self-righteousness. Now finally, someone with actual power, with actual teeth, was talking about making them pay. The next few weeks were a goddamn whirlwind of legal activity. David Lee was a force of nature, a legal tornado. He filed motions I didn't understand. He subpoenaed bank records, not just the ones I'd managed to sneak out of the Petersons' House of Horrors, but all of them, going back 15 goddamn years from every institution they'd ever banked with. He contacted the Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General, the state's Child Welfare Department, flagging their case for suspected fraud. He started building a case against John and Carol Peterson, brick by damning, irrefutable brick, that was so solid, so overwhelmingly comprehensive, it made my head spin with a mixture of awe and terrified anticipation. The Petersons, of course, didn't just sit back and wait for the hammer to fall. Oh no, they were too arrogant, too entrenched in their own lies for that. They hired their own lawyer, some expensive, slicked-back downtown shark named Mr. Davenport, who probably specialized in defending rich, guilty-as-sin scumbags just like them. Davenport immediately went on the attack, trying to paint me, Ethan Blackwood, as a troubled, vindictive, emotionally unstable teenager, a pathological liar with a history of behavioral issues. Thanks again, Mrs. Albright, for that little gem they were now gleefully, publicly exploiting. He filed motions to have my case dismissed immediately, claiming I had no legal standing, that the Petersons were my loving, legal guardians, and had always, always acted in my best interests. Best interests, my ass, my goddamn ramen noodle and thrift store clothes wearing ass. The preliminary hearing was a goddamn circus, a three-ring catastrophe of lies and legal bullshit. The Petersons showed up looking like they were attending their own goddamn funeral, which, in a way, I suppose they were. The funeral of their respectable community pillar reputations. Carol Peterson was dabbing at her, still suspiciously, infuriatingly dry, eyes with an expensive-looking lace handkerchief, probably bought with my money. John Peterson looked pale and sweaty under his ill-fitting suit, his usual booming bluster replaced by a kind of shifty-eyed, cornered nervousness that was almost satisfying to watch. Davenport, their overpaid legal mouthpiece, was all slick charm and oily condescending pronouncements. He tried to make me sound like a delusional, ungrateful, gold-digging brat who was just out to extort money from his kind, loving, long-suffering foster parents. He brought up my violent outburst in their office, the one where I'd calmly confronted them with 15 years of their own thievery. He even had the unmitigated goddamn nerve to try and suggest that Miss Diaz, my sainted, fire-breathing, 7th grade English teacher, had somehow coached me, improperly influenced me, manipulated me into making these wild, unfounded, and deeply hurtful accusations against the only real parents I'd ever known. The sheer, unadulterated nerve of that slimeball, I wanted to jump over the table and throttle him. But David Lee? Oh, David Lee was a goddamn artist, a maestro of legal destruction. He calmly, methodically, surgically dismantled Davenport's pathetic arguments. He presented the initial damning bank statements, the SSA benefit letters. He highlighted the 15 years of systematic, unexplained withdrawals, the luxury purchases, the stark, undeniable contrast between their lavish lifestyle and my deliberately impoverished existence under their loving care. He pointed out their immediate, coordinated, and vicious smear campaign against me after I discovered their fraud, arguing it showed a clear, undeniable pattern of consciousness of guilt and a desperate attempt to discredit a crucial witness, me. The judge, a no-nonsense, seen-it-all older woman named Judge Harriet Stone, whose expression could curdle milk at 50 paces, listened to it all, her face an unreadable granite mask. She wasn't buying Davenport's pathetic tap dance, not one goddamn bit. She denied his motion to dismiss my case. She ordered full, immediate, and comprehensive financial disclosure from John and Carol Peterson, covering the entire 15-year period of their guardianship. And then, with a gimlet eye fixed on their crumbling facades, she set a date for a formal evidentiary hearing. That was a small victory. A very small, very satisfying victory. But the war, I knew, was far from over. The Petersons, finally, realizing they were in deep, irreversible trouble, escalated their tactics beyond just whispers and lies. Suddenly, concerned, anonymous calls started flooding into my school again, this time with even more outlandish claims, that I was dealing drugs from my locker, that I was a violent threat to other students, that I was exhibiting psychotic tendencies. The school administration, to their everlasting credit this time, probably thanks to a very strongly worded preemptive call from Mr. David Lee, outlining the Petersons' previous campaign of malicious bullshit and the potential legal ramifications of them ignoring it this time, didn't immediately suspend me or call the goddamn men in white coats, but it was more harassment, more stress. More of their goddamn insidious poison seeping into every remaining corner of my already fractured life. Then came their witnesses. Suddenly, a couple of the Petersons' closest church friends, those other pillars of the community just like them, miraculously remembered a series of disturbing incidents from years ago, how I'd been disrespectful and sullen as a child. how I'd always had a bad attitude and a troubling fixation on money, how dear, sweet Carol Peterson had tearfully confided in them over many a potluck supper about how incredibly difficult and emotionally draining I was to raise. All carefully curated, conveniently vague, but clearly designed to paint a consistent picture of me as a lifelong, ungrateful, disturbed problem child. David Lee just smiled when I frantically told him about this new offensive. A cold, dangerous, almost predatory smile that sent a shiver of pure, unadulterated joy down my spine. "Let them bring their goddamn witnesses, Ethan," he said, his voice a low, confident purr. "Let them parade their perjuring friends onto the stand. It will only make our eventual victory that much sweeter, and their downfall that much more spectacular." The evidentiary hearing was a goddamn courtroom drama, come to life, better than anything on television. Davenport, looking increasingly desperate, paraded out the Petersons' character witnesses, who all sang the same sad, rehearsed song about what wonderful, sacrificing, God-fearing Christian people John and Carol Peterson were, and what a troubled, ungrateful, financially obsessed burden I'd clearly always been to their generous souls. Then Miss Diaz, my fiery, magnificent 7th grade English teacher, took the stand for me. And in about 10 minutes of blistering, eloquent, no-holds-barred testimony, she didn't just shred their carefully constructed, pious narrative, she nuked it from orbit. She painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture of the Petersons' subtle, insidious neglect, their constant put-downs, and my quiet, desperate resilience. She even remembered with photographic clarity specific instances from years ago where she'd had to discreetly buy me lunch because I forgot mine so often, or when she'd noticed the threadbare state of my winter coat in the middle of January, details I hadn't even told David Lee about, details that made Carol Peterson actually squirm in her seat. Then came the financial expert David Lee had hired, a sharp, no-nonsense forensic accountant who looked like she ate numbers for breakfast and liars for lunch. She laid out, in excruciating, undeniable, chart and graph-filled detail, 15 solid years of John and Carol Peterson's financial records. Every single government benefit check deposited into their network of secret, undeclared accounts. Every single stolen dollar siphoned off for their personal, selfish use. Every goddamn Caribbean cruise. Every designer shopping spree. Every last golf club membership for John Peterson. Every spa day for Carol. She even calculated, down to the goddamn penny, exactly how much they had stolen from me over the course of those 15 years, including conservative estimates for lost interest and squandered investment potential. The final number, when she announced it to the hushed courtroom, was staggering. Indecent, criminal. Enough to make even Judge Stone's usually impassive eyebrows shoot up into her hairline. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, when it was finally their turn to testify under oath, were an unmitigated, glorious disaster. Under David Lee's relentless, laser-focused surgical cross-examination, their carefully rehearsed stories unraveled like cheap sweaters. Their lies contradicted each other, then contradicted themselves. John Peterson tried to bluster and play the indignant patriarch, but David Lee cut him off at the knees with a highlighted bank statement showing a massive withdrawal the same day a new jet ski appeared in their driveway. Carol Peterson tried the waterworks, the trembling lower lip, the artfully dabbed tears, but Judge Stone looked about as moved as a goddamn granite statue. They tried to claim the stolen money was for general household expenses, for enrichment activities, specifically for my benefit. David Lee then, with a flourish, produced a series of photographs. Me in my holey sneakers and threadbare jeans from my school yearbooks, juxtaposed with the Petersons' vacation photos from the Bahamas, their gleaming BMW X5, Carol Peterson's extensive and apparently ever-expanding collection of designer handbags. The courtroom was utterly, completely silent. You could have heard a goddamn pin drop. Except perhaps for the faint, distinct sound of John and Carol Peterson's carefully constructed facade of respectability crashing and burning into a pile of smoldering, pathetic ash. The final, beautiful, brutal nail in their thieving coffin, Ashley Peterson, their precious, biological, golden child. The one whose out-of-state private university tuition, whose European summer backpacking trips, whose brand new convertible for her 16th birthday had all been, at least in part, funded by my stolen money. David Lee, through some brilliant, strategic legal maneuvering that I still don't fully understand, had managed to subpoena not just her college financial aid records, but also detailed breakdowns of her parents' declared contributions to her education and lifestyle. She was called as a hostile witness. Ashley walked in, looking like a deer caught in the blinding headlights of an oncoming 18-wheeler, a younger, prettier, infinitely more expensively dressed version of her grasping mother. Davenport, her parents' increasingly desperate lawyer, tried to object to shield her from the impending carnage, but Judge Stone, her expression now openly contemptuous as she looked at the Petersons, allowed it. David Lee, to his credit, was surprisingly gentle with Ashley. He didn't accuse her of anything. He just asked questions, simple, direct questions, about her lifestyle, her college expenses, her general awareness of her parents' financial situation. Ashley, clearly deeply uncomfortable, torn between a lifetime of ingrained loyalty to her parents and the undeniable, damning truth of the documents David Lee was calmly, methodically presenting to her, started to visibly crumble on the stand. She admitted, her voice barely a whisper, that yes, she'd always wondered where all the money for her expensive European summer cultural enrichment trips came from, especially when her parents were always complaining to her about how incredibly tight things were financially because of all Alex's unfortunate needs and special requirements. She admitted, under further gentle but persistent questioning, that yes, she'd occasionally seen her mother hastily hide bank statements or financial documents when she unexpectedly walked into the room. She admitted she'd suspected, for years, that something wasn't quite right, that the numbers didn't add up, but she'd been too scared, too comfortable, too complicit in her own privilege to ever question it. It wasn't a full, dramatic Perry Mason-style confession of her parents' guilt, but it was enough, more than enough. The look on Carol Peterson's face when her own precious, perfect golden daughter inadvertently but completely threw her under the bus, priceless. Absolutely goddamn priceless. I almost felt sorry for Ashley. Almost. Judge Stone didn't take long to deliver her ruling from the bench. It was, in a word, brutal. And it was, in every conceivable way, beautiful. She found John and Carol Peterson guilty. Guilty of systematic, long-term fiduciary abuse of a minor. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of embezzlement of federal funds. She ordered them to repay every single stolen cent of my survivor benefits, plus 15 years of accrued interest, plus substantial punitive damages that made my eyes water and David Lee grin like a goddamn Cheshire cat. She stripped them immediately of their guardianship over me and my now considerable estate. She ordered a full, exhaustive audit of all their personal and business finances by a court-appointed independent receiver. And then, the glorious, magnificent cherry on top of the Justice Sundae, she referred their entire sordid case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation and prosecution on multiple potential criminal charges. The Petersons, John, and Carol, my loving, sacrificing foster parents, just sat there at the defendant's table, stunned, broken, their faces ashen gray, their expensive clothes suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. Their reign of lies, their 15-year con, was over. Utterly, spectacularly, publicly over. The gavel came down like the voice of God, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone somewhere actually gave a damn about what happened to Ethan Blackwood.